Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. Today in this video I'll be discussing about Spring profiles. So let's get started. So first I'll discuss what are the Spring Boot profiles, and then we'll see that how are we going to activate that profiles in a Spring Boot project and what are the good practices, and then in the end I'll be giving demo for the implementation of these profiles. So let me talk about what is Spring Boot profiles. It allows us to define environment specific configurations. What do you mean by environment specific configuration? Let's say you have some properties which will be only needing when you run your application in local environment, or some properties which will be only be needed when you run your application in dev environment or in a prod environment. So let's say you have a database connected to your application, and when you run your application in local, you connect with local database. When you run your application in dev environment, you connect with dev database, and when you run your application in prod environment, you connect with prod database. So in each environment you will have a different database credentials. So in order to connect your application with the correct database, when you run your application in a specific environment, you need to provide respective database credentials. So here we can use this profile concept where we can give the database credential in different specific configuration file, and it should load based on what profile you are running your application. So in example you can see that I have taken for port. So in dev environment my port is 8080, but in prod environment it is 8081. So you can even define all the properties. Here I have taken example of port, but similarly if you have some different properties, you can just define those property in corresponding configuration file. Next, once you are define the property in the configuration file, how are we going to activate that profile? So there are multiple ways by which you can activate your profile. So depending on like what ways you are trying to run your application, so you can add this spring profile.active is equal to dev or prod or whatever environment you are running, that in a application.properties file. Or if you are running through command line, you can just pass the environment in a command line. Or if you are running your application in any of the IDE, here I have taken example for IntelliJ. So there you can set up the environment variable that we will see when I give the demo, like how are we going to set this environment variable when I have used IntelliJ. So this we'll be seeing in a while. So watch video till end. Now I'll talk about best practices for Spring profiles. So we should always avoid hard coding profiles in the code. Never use dev config in production. Use default profile for common config. A combined profile if needed, dev or local, or it may be depending upon your use case. And use @profile, and then if you don't want something needs to be needed, you can exclude that using this @profile, and then you can pass that environment specific. So it will not load, it will exclude from the loading. So basically this Spring profile helps bridge development and production world seamlessly. So it does not require intervention when you run your application in different environment, because since you have set up the profile, it will run seamlessly. It will run seamlessly in the any of the environment. So this was the theory. Now let's move to how we are going to implement this in Spring Boot application. So I'll go to IntelliJ. So this is my application. This is Spring Boot application, and the code is in continuation of my previous videos. I'm following this scenario based questions. So in interview this is also asked, like they will give you the scenario, like if you have a different configuration and that needs to be loaded based on the environment, how are you going to handle that in your project? So this spring profile concept comes into the picture. So let's see like how we are going to implement this spring profile. So as I discussed in the theory, it helps us to write configuration based on the specific environment. So here you see I have in resources folder I have three properties file. One is application.properties, then I have one application-dev.properties, and then I have one application-prod.properties. So these are the different environment specific profile. So if I run my application in local, it should pick from application.properties, and if I run my application in dev environment, it should pick from application-dev.properties, and if my application is run in prod environment, it should pick from application.properties file. So this is how we are going to create a environment specific properties file, and then you can add all the configuration or all the configs which are environment specific in this specific properties file. So here you see I have added this message. If you see, most of the config will be same because I am only running in my local, so my credentials will be same, but the difference you will find in this greet message. I have taken a variable called greet message. So this message will give you the which environment your application is running. So we will see that the message is coming from a specific application.properties file or not. So you see in my application.properties it says that library management system is up and running in local environment. Similarly, if you go to application.dev.properties, it says that library management system is up and running in dev environment. And in prod it says that library management system is up and running in prod environment. So when I run my application in different environment, the message should change. That will confirm that it is loading data from a specific properties file. So this is how we will define that profile in application, and how we are going to activate this profile, whether it is working or not, that we can add in an environment variable. So here you see in configuration I have added this environment variable. It is saying that spring profile active is equal to local. So it should pick data from application.properties file, not dev. So just to give the demo, I have just created an API so that when I call that API, it should pick the message from a specific properties file. So let me close this and let me execute this application. So I'll just start the application. So you see my application is started on port 8080. Now I'll go to the postman. So here you see, okay, before I go to postman, let me show you the API. I have a health controller here written. There is one API called health check, and this message, it is just simply returning the message which is coming from application.properties. So when I run this application in different environment, the message should change. So currently this application is running in local environment. You see here the environment variable is set, which is local. So it should pick the message from application.properties file, this file. So the message should come, this message, library management system is up and running in local environment. Let me go to the postman. So here you see I have a health check API. I will go to here, and when I run this API, the message should come from local properties file. So let me run this. Now you can see that the message which is coming here as a response, it is saying that library management system is up and running in local environment, because this is the same message written in the application.properties file. Now I'll just change the environment and we'll see that message is changing or not. So let me stop the application because I need to restart when I change the application, when I change the environment variable. So now let me go to the edit configuration, and here you can pass dev, then apply, and then OK. Now you need to restart the application, so I'll just restart, and again you can see that my application is started on port 8080, so it is started. Now the message should come from application.dev.properties file. So now the message in response should be library management system is up and running in dev environment. So let me go to postman and hit this API again, and this message should change, because last time when we run, this message was coming from application.properties file because environment variable was set to local, and this time we have set to dev environment, so it should take the message from application dev properties file. So let me get that. So here you see now the message is changed and it is saying that library management system is up and running in dev environment. So it is picking the data or config from the corresponding environment the application is running. Similarly, we can go and run the application in prod. So you don't have to do anything, just edit this environment variable to prod, apply, OK, and then you need to restart to get the latest environment variable. So I'll just restart the application again. It got started. Now again you go to postman, hit this API. Now the message should come from prod environment. So here you see library management system is up and running in a prod environment. So this is how we are going to implement profile in your Spring Boot application. And you can also use, like, sometimes you need to create a bean based on the specific environment. That is also another use case. That is a task for you. You implement Spring profile and check it out, like how we are going to implement that conditional bean based on the environment. So I hope that I was able to make you understand. If you don't understand, let me know in the comment section. I'll be happy to help you. And I'll be also adding this code to my GitHub repo, and that repo link I'll be adding in the video. So if you need any help, you can check out that repo and look into the code. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next video.